Welcome again, everybody, to another edition of Virginia Wine and Song, the YouTube channel where we pair a Virginia wine with an underrated album or CD or whatever the medium may be, and we try to pair the two. So today is actually December 14th, 2025, and here in the Shenandoah Valley, it is extremely cold, which is why I'm wearing a cap inside my house, because it's cold even inside. I have a Bills cap on, and you got to support the Bills. So anyway, it's about 5 degrees outside with the wind chill, so it's cold compared to these videos that I shot last summer. Quite cold. I think it's a polar vortex or something. Very unusual for December in this part of Virginia. So anyway, we're going to talk about an album and a wine. I couldn't really find a connection between the wine and the album, so there's really no connection. I sometimes try to find a connection, but there isn't one this time. This is a winery that it's an old friend, and it's a winery that I've been going to since 2001. And I'm happy to say that this winery hasn't really changed much since then. It's always been kind of a best kept secret, I think, a real getaway. It's near Sperryville, Virginia, which is on the eastern side of the Blue Ridge Mountains. So not very far from Northern Virginia. You can probably make it there in one day and go back to Northern Virginia if you'd like. And the winery is called Sharp Rock. Sharp Rock Winery, probably about 8 miles southwest of Sperryville. Really well marked. They have the old brown grape cluster signs. And if you are familiar with Virginia wineries, and you remember how they started back in the 90s, they originally started with the highway signs that were brown with the grape clusters on them, and they changed them, I think, sometime in 2008 or 2009 to purple. So they have the original brown wine signs on the highway, which means it's an old winery. And like I said, it hasn't changed that much. In fact, its prices are still very affordable compared to other wineries, even in the area. And they don't have a huge selection of wines, but I happen to like every wine they have. Currently their lineup is Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay Reserve, Cab Franc, of course, the Cab Franc, Old Rag Red, which is a blend, which is what I have right here, a Rosé Noir, which is an off-dry rosé, a little sweeter side, but not overly sweet. I mean, if I can drink it, then it's not too sweet, and I can drink it. And they have one called Chamois Blanc, which is a Chardonnay and Vidal Blanc blend. And then they have a regular dry rosé, a very dry rosé, and they have Synergy, which is a blend of Petit Verdot and Syrah. So they have a nice selection of reds and whites, and they're really good. I mean, they're very. The winery is very unassuming. It's very industrial. You actually, to get to the taste room, you have to walk up these stairs of this house, this cabin type setting, and you have to go, right next to where he makes the wine. So you see the wine making area right when you walk up the steps to the tasting room. The tasting room is very small, very intimate, and most likely you'll see the owner behind the counter. The owner is Jim East. Sometimes his wife is behind the counter as well, but usually it's him. If they're not very busy, if they're not busy, you'll be treated to a nice conversation. I mean, he knows a lot about the industry. He's been making wine since at least the late 90s. Like I said, his winery, I think, has been open since 2000 or 2001, maybe even earlier. He also has a B&B. So he has a B&B or an Airbnb. I don't know. He has it listed on his website as a B&B. So I think it's a B&B. There is a difference between Airbnb and B&B. B&B, you get a little more customer service. The owner is usually on the premises, so that it's a B&B, and it's a beautiful little B&B. They're like cottages that are right off the river. There's a little river, not a very big river, but a nice river, more like a stream or a creek. But it goes right in front of the property, and after a rain, it's a mountain creek. So it's a burbling or babbling mountain creek with rocks and everything, and you can just. That's why it's called Sharp Rock, because I guess somebody decided to take a little bit of a walk in that river, and maybe they slipped on a sharp rock. Who knows? But that's the name of the winery. And like I said, excellent place to go He's in the shadow of Old Rag Mountain, and I've actually seen people come there after their hike on Old Rag. I would go to this winery after your hike, not before your hike. If you go there before your hike, you may encounter some difficulties because Old Rag is not really an easy hike. But go afterwards. Reward yourself with an afternoon, a couple hours, especially in warmer weather. He's got an indoor area as well where you can sit if it's colder outside. He's got a little balcony or a deck behind his tasting room that overlooks the vineyards, and you can see the mountains. It is just a wonderful setting. There are a couple other wineries in the area that are a little slicker that also have beautiful views. Like I said before, you're not going to get the same type of experience at every single Virginia winery. That's why I love the Virginia wine scene so much. You go to Sonoma or Napa, or even some wineries in Texas, if you've been to Texas, or even the Finger Lakes. The Finger Lakes are more similar to the Virginia wineries. But out in California especially, maybe even Texas, a lot of the wineries they kind of run into each other. They're kind of the same, I think. Whereas the wineries in Virginia, they're all a little different, for better or for worse, mostly for better. No two wineries are alike. So anyway, Sharp Rock, great winery. This is Old Rag Red, which is 13.4%. 13.4%. That's a little high, actually, for Virginia wine. Virginia makes wines in the European method. They don't make wines in the New World method. The New World method is California and Oregon on the West Coast. Those wines tend to be higher alcohol. The Old World or European method are lower alcohol. This one's 13.4, which is a little high, but still obviously very drinkable. And I usually get this when I go there. I like all of his wines, but I decided it is wintertime, so it's time to have a lot of red on my rack. So I got this Sharp Rock Old Rag Red. Please check them out. Sharp Rock is just a delightful place to go. So what goes with this wine? And as I said at the beginning of this video, I couldn't find a parallel or a connection between the wine and the music. I try to do that. But I think this album that I have chosen works really well for December. It's a real cold weather record. I think the album came out in the winter. I think it came out in the winter of 1996. It came out, I think, in January or February of 96. I remember when this album came out. And it definitely came out in the wintertime. It wasn't Christmas, it was like January or February. And the album is by Sting. And with the temperature being the way it is today, Mercury Falling is a really, really good title, or a really good album to have. So there is a connection, at least between the weather and the music, not necessarily the wine, although I'm sure Sting will approve of this wine. And the reason why I call this album underrated is because it came out after one of his best-selling records. The album that was before this was 10 Summoner's Tales, which was, I think, probably, to this day, I think it is his top-grossing, top-selling solo album. And 10 Summoner's Tales came out in 1993, and it had a number of songs that were played on the radio. So this album came out afterwards in 1996, and it really didn't get a lot of airplay. I think a couple of album-oriented rock stations played it, but this is not, I wouldn't really call Sting rock at this point. Sting's solo career, I would classify it actually more like jazz or even maybe folk. I mean, his music is not like the Police. Don't go into Sting's solo career expecting to hear the Police. The first solo album he did is probably the closest thing he did to the albums he did with the Police. But his later solo albums, especially his, Nothing Like the Sun, and definitely The Soul Cages, those are very introspective albums, very jazzy. And so is this. Mercury Falling, like I said, I don't think there were any songs on this album. However, I mean, of course there's songs on this album, hits on this album. There were no real hits on this album. But there was a song that was covered by Johnny Cash right before, a couple of years before he passed away. He covered a song called I Hung My Head. And I Hung My Head by Johnny Cash is pretty well known, especially if you're a country music fan or a Johnny Cash fan. You may even think that song was a Johnny Cash original, because it's very similar to the type of song Johnny Cash would write. I Hung My Head. It's got Western motifs, cowboy motifs in there, which is right up Johnny Cash's alley. And I'm wondering if Sting wrote that song as sort of a tribute to Johnny Cash. And of course, Johnny Cash, like I said, covered it. But it's a Sting original. He wrote that song. So that's probably the best known song from this album. Another song that's on this album that really fits in with this time of year is The Hounds of Winter. Like I said, it's a winter album. This is a remaster. This is a vinyl remaster. They remastered. I shouldn't say remaster. I should say repressed. Repressed all of the solo albums on Heavy Gram vinyl about 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. His albums, by the way, the original CD releases of Sting's solo albums are mostly done all digitally. They're all DDD. If you remember if you're a music fan and you were around in the 80s when CDs first came out, you may remember the different designations. There was DDD, which is fully digital recording. Top of the line. If you bought a DDD CD back in 1987, for example, you were getting a really pure audiophile experience. And all of his solo albums were done on CD and DDD. So ADD was the non-digital, which was a little more standard. It was a little more economical. So most CDs were pressed in ADD or AAD, but DDD was fully digital, and only a few albums back in the day, back in the late 80s, were done in CD form on DDD. But all of Sting's solo albums were DDD, which is why they've never remastered them on CD, because they sound so great as the original releases. But with a vinyl, on the other hand, he decided to license out the rights to all of his solo albums to do Heavy Gram Heavy Gram pressings of all of his solo albums. So his solo albums, at least the ones from 1985 to 1999, have all been done on Heavy Gram vinyl. And this is Heavy Gram vinyl. I feel it in my hand how heavy it is. I think I've played it once on my turntable, my current turntable, just to make sure it sounded okay. I don't have a very good turntable right now. It's a kind of a cheapie. I want to buy a higher quality turntable at some point. So I'm saving this, but I did want to play it just to make sure it sounded okay. And even on my cheapie turntable, this sounded very, very good. So anyway, this is Mercury falling. Mercury is definitely falling. I think I saw the weather forecast today for the Shenandoah Valley that with the wind chill, by 5 p.m. today, with the wind chill, it's going to be -1 degrees. -1 degree, -1. That's like Minnesota weather. That's crazy. So anyway, Mercury is definitely falling. It goes well with Sharp Rock. Anything goes well with Sharp Rock, but this is a great warm weather wine, or cold weather. I just came back from a 3-mile walk. Okay, I like to do a 3-mile or 4-mile walk every day, and I did that out in this like really, really cold weather. So I'm a little bit freaked out right now because of how cold it is, which is why I'm wearing a cap inside my house. So anyway, Sharp Rock, great wine for cold weather, maybe warm weather too. And of course, this album is great. If you have it on CD, put the CD on. It's DDD. The last thing I will do before I break is I want to give you a bonus. Sting, believe it or not, put out what a lot of people claim to be the most somber and most introspective Christmas album ever recorded. That's, I think, what the All Music Guide called this. This isn't CD. I don't have this on vinyl. I only have it on CD, and I pull this out every December. And if you're a person who doesn't really like Christmas music, like me, I like Christmas. I like the Christmas season, and I like the decorations, and I like the festivities around it. But I'm not a big fan of Christmas music. I think the Charlie Brown theme, the Charlie Brown Christmas theme, I think that's one of the most depressing Christmas songs ever written. But I kind of like that one. But anyway, this is a Christmas album. People don't really like Christmas albums, and these are standards. These are folk songs that Sting recorded, and all of these songs, or most of these songs, have a winter or a Christmas theme behind them. And he includes one of his own songs on here, The Hounds of Winter, which was originally on Mercury Falling. He re-recorded, which he likes to do. Sting likes to re-record his songs. Even the Police songs, some of his Police songs, he re-recorded for his solo albums later. He likes to toy around with his songs. I mean, he has every right to. They're his songs. Most of the songs are great songs, so why not play around with them? And he does that with The Hounds of Winter on this. He turns it more into a very frosty. You listen to the song and you really feel like you're getting cold, or you're being cold. And the cover of the CD, you can't really see it, but he's walking in the woods with his dog. So this CD came out in 2009 release. He was doing a lot of experimental stuff back in 2009, 2010, 2011. He even put out an album of songs recorded with only a lute. He wanted to master the instrument, the lute, which is a classical, Renaissance era musical instrument that was sort of like the beginning, the original guitar, if you will. And he wanted to do a song composed, with nothing but lutes on it. So he put that out. So he was really doing some experimental stuff. And of course, he wrote his play later on, The Last Ship. Very, very talented guy. I mean, some people call him arrogant. I don't think he's arrogant. I think he's just so focused on his work. He's so consumed by it, which is why, and Billy Joel is as well. I think a lot of people mistake arrogance with just extremely critical of not only other people but also their own work. He's very critical of his own work as well. So this CD is called "If on a Winter's Night." Great Gabriel's Message, which I think is actually was played on a couple of Christmas stations back in the 2009 or so when this song came out. Gabriel's Message. Actually, I think that song was from A Very Special Christmas. Those series of CDs that they put out back in the late 90s and early 2000s for people, I think for the homeless people, or I can't remember what the charity was for A Very Special Christmas, but you remember the CD series. I think it was either for children in developing countries who couldn't really celebrate Christmas because they were impoverished. I don't remember, and I'm not going to look it up right now because I don't want to waste anybody's time, but he originally recorded Gabriel's Message for A Very Special Christmas. And Soul Cake is actually a real classic standard that goes back. Let me see how old that song is. I will look that up. Soul Cake. It's a traditional song. It's a traditional children's song, I think. And Wikipedia. I said I wasn't going to waste your time, but I'm curious. Soul Cake. Okay, well, it's just bringing up the actual what it is. The cake itself is not bringing up the song. But the song, if you hear the song, you probably have heard it before. Whether you've heard it in church, I think they do sing it at church, especially around Christmas time. It's a folk song. So anyway, a very frosty Christmas record. It's on the Deutsche Grammophon label, which is a classical music label. So there you go. Sting is on a classical music label for this album. So check it out if you're really into a different type of Christmas music experience. I highly recommend it. You probably can stream it or Spotify it if you want to Spotify it. And this is Mercury Falling. Check these out. Listen to them. Wonderful stuff to listen to around the holidays. And drink this wine, Sharp Rock. And I hope you enjoyed this, and we will see you next time.